Okay, I'd like to call to order the village board meeting of the Village of Ashwaubenon for Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. Roll call, please.
President Kardasky.
Here.
Trustee Service.
Here.
Trustee Paul.
Here.
Trustee Zerbal.
Here.
Trustee Atkinson.
Here.
Trustee Krieger.
Here.
And Trustee Flukie.
Here. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please remember our men and women throughout the world in uniform. I have no changes to the agenda. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, comments from the public. During the public comment period and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.84, Parent 2, individuals must state their name and address. Comments are limited to items not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes. Personnel issues cannot be discussed nor individuals named. The board's role is to listen and receive information from the public, and the board is not able to take action at this meeting. Is there anybody who would like to make any comments on items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Good evening. My name is Tony Yagi. We live at 2100 Holmgren Way, apartment 407. My wife Kathy is with me tonight. And we certainly like to thank the Village of Ashwaubenon for the work they have done for the activities that go on in this community. I mean, the baseball, the soccer, and the business environment is outstanding. We're here this evening with a concern of what we see with some drivers that are far exceeding the speed limit. And we'd appreciate if some attention could be paid to that. I don't mean any disrespect in regards to anybody, but we did attend a professional women's tennis tournament in Toronto, and they have a different way of giving a speeding ticket to those that want to travel much faster than they should. They're simply on, they take a camera picture of the license plate and you receive a ticket in the mail. I guess our concern is a lot of folks are parking in different locations to attend baseball or soccer, and they have to cross the road. And you have senior citizens and you have young children, and we're just concerned that that's not what we'd like to see happen, because somebody is really abusing the speed limit of 30 miles an hour. We thank you for your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to present this.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Okay, number 6, written communications and/or announcements. 6A, oath of office for the new public safety officer. Chief.
Come on up, Mason.
Corvette Club.
First of all, Village Board, I'd like to thank you for allowing us to take the time to swear in one of our newer officers. This is Mason Marvin. Tonight we're going to be swearing him in. I'd like to give a little bit of a background with Mason here. Mason actually came to us last year in 2024, in the middle of the year. He came as a paramedic, and at the time, our department was rather short with paramedics, so he was able to fill in and work on shift as a paramedic. And with that, in January, he started out at the Law Enforcement Academy at NWTC. Graduated early this spring and was in field training for 12 weeks. Successfully passed that and has now been working on his own on shift. And he has done a tremendous job. And we always kind of write things up on our officers and kind of to describe them. I've heard nothing but positive feedback with Mason, and as interim chief coming in, it's great to have positive comments on a gentleman like this. Because there's a couple things I always like to mention is that Mason has his family who's here tonight to support him and shows the love and support. But I always have to tell our new officers is that he has the love and support of our men and women from this department. You have this family, and now you have our family, and our family is here to always support you. But one of the things I was thinking of was when I wanted to describe Mason, and he kind of filled it out himself as I was kind of looking at some of his background. Mason's organized, he's dependable, he's successful at managing multiple priorities with a positive attitude, and I think that goes a long way. A positive attitude will certainly get you anything whenever your cards are down. And so tonight, I'd like to swear in Mason, and his mother, Krista, is going to be pinning his badge on. So if you'd like to come up, and I'm going to have you take a seat here for me, please, Krista, and I'm going to swear you in, all right? Let's do it, sir. You ready? Raise your right hand.
I, Mason Marvin, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Public Safety Officer for the Village of Ashwaubenon, acting to the best of my ability. Thanks, Chief.
Now be careful. It only hurts a little bit. Congratulations.
Wow. Good job.
Right.
Welcome, Mason. Okay. So the 6B, this is a really important one, the hours of the 2025 Halloween trick or treat. So
Believe it.
that is, we're waiting for the chief.
Yeah, no action. It's just basically just a confirmation that trick or treat is planned for Friday, October 31st, 2025 at its standard time of 4 to 7 p.m. So pretty standard, nothing's changed. It just happens to be a Friday this year, so we will probably be a little extra busy on that day.
Yes, extra busy that day. Okay, moving on to number 7, public hearings. 7A, public hearing on ordinance 09-2-25, requesting an amendment to the planned unit development PUD overlay zoning at 460 Marina Lane, parcel VA-132-13. Aaron.
All right, thank you. I'll share my screen just to bring up a couple of the images of the area. Just for background, this area does have an approved planned unit development overlay currently. The request is to make a few adjustments to the PUD. So this is an amendment to the existing PUD for this area that you see in green right here. This is the Residence Inn that you see here. In brief, the primary change to the PUD amendment is reflected here in the site plan. It does move the CBRF memory care facility here a little further to the east to accommodate the access to Broadway right here, which the applicant was able to work with Brown County to obtain full access here off of Broadway at the request of public safety. There's a reduction in the total number of apartment units. There was, I believe, 150 or so, give or take. It's been reduced down to 2 different apartment buildings. You see here in the northeast part of the property, as well as here in this, I guess, southwestern part of it. There are now 2 apartment buildings, a total of 64 units, so reduction in density. They are two 3-story buildings. They do have integrated garages as well as 2 detached garages right here for overflow parking here and here. Initially, there was a 55-plus age restriction on the apartments. That has been lifted as a result of just market research. The townhomes that you see right here are to be owner-occupied. Those really have not changed much at all. Still 6 total townhomes fronting on the river in this retention pond. In terms of phasing of development, Phase 1 does include the attached townhomes you see here. Again, driveway access to Marina Lane, as well as then the CBRF also right here. Those are to start in 2026, 2025, with estimated completion in 2026. The apartment buildings, garages, and the development amenities, including the pool, pickleball court, and picnic areas, are to be starting in June of 2026 with completion estimated December of 2027 or so. Extra materials, we've gone through that a little bit with the applicant, worked through some details on that. I'll identify those in the recommended conditions of approval. I do want to note there are sidewalks interior to the property. You see here from Broadway continuing around and to the south that will connect to a sidewalk. It's not shown on the site plan on Marina Lane. We are working with Public Works and Finance to get an extension of that sidewalk along the Residence Inn to Broadway in our next budget to make sure that there's a good pedestrian connection to Broadway so people do not cut through the development to use the sidewalk. Ashwaubenon Site Plan Review Committee and Plan Commission did both recommend approval of the PUD amendment at their meetings with the recommended conditions. In terms of recommended conditions of approval, I'll just read through those. All parking areas, landscape islands, and drive areas are to have curbing, either conventional, curb pan, or rolled. Screen any rooftop or ground-mounted mechanical units visible from the property boundaries or South Broadway or Marina Lane rights-of-way. Substitute a permissible exterior cladding material for the proposed vinyl siding on the CBRF apartment building and garages. They will be substituting an engineered wood siding, which is permissible under our code. Lap siding is limited to no more than 25% of the surface area of any one elevation. There will be some substitution of some board and batten siding to accommodate that condition. Work with a qualified environmental consultant to remain in compliance with DNR voluntary party liability exemption for closed case number 06-05-343470 throughout utility taps, construction, and restoration. As noted, extend the sidewalks from the southerly apartment building and amenities area south to the Marina Lane right-of-way. Install a sidewalk along Marina Lane from the westerly property line east of the connection with the Ashwaubenon River Trail. And then as noted, we're working with DPW to extend that to Broadway starting next year. Fences in the residential areas are limited to no more than 6 feet in height. That is identified within the PUD as an exception. They're requesting 8 feet, basically privacy panels between the residential townhomes that you see on the riverfront. Meet all applicable requirements of the Ashwaubenon site plan review and all other applicable village ordinances. Continuing on from stormwater management, coordinate the 2 water and 2 sanitary from utilities engineering. Coordinate the 2 water and 2 sanitary lateral taps with Al Farber per note in the plans. Provide verification that Brown County Highway has approved curb and median cut onto South Broadway. From stormwater management, complete the maintenance on the stormwater pond, including trash sediment, vegetation removal, etc. And revise the grading plan along the north property line to include a swale to runoff stays on site and treated by the existing storm pond. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them as part of the action item.
Okay, does anybody have any comments about this? This is a public hearing. Does anybody in the audience have any comments for or against this project? You would have, if you'd like to come up to the table and state your name and address for the record, please.
Jennifer Wellhouse, 2190 Center Street. I just have a question. Did you say that the river trail is then gonna go in front of that, new construction? Or is it gonna extend from where it is now to go into front of that construction?
No, it won't. It'll terminate where it is right now, but the sidewalk will extend along the north side of Marina Lane to connect to Broadway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments for the public hearing for or against this project? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion to close the hearing.
So move.
Second?
Motion and a second to close the hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Okay, number 8, action on consent agenda. 8A, consider, discuss, act on the open and closed minutes of the August 26, 2025 Village Board meeting. B, consider, discuss, act on Class B beer, Class B liquor license extension at Titletown specifically for special events. C, consider, discuss, act on the budgeted expenditures for periods between 8/21/2025. D, receive, accept the general fund financial reports for August 2025. E, receive, accept the August 2025 investment report. F, receive, accept the September 2025 Public Works Department report. And G, receive, accept the September 2025 Parks, Rec, and Forestry Department reports. If anybody wants anything taken out and discussed, otherwise I need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as written. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 9, ordinances and/or resolutions. 9A, consider, discuss, act on ordinance 09-1-25, amending Municipal Code, Chapter 9, Section 9-1-1, Criminal Code. Joel?
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Administration has been made aware that the battery charges have now been divided into more specific categories under state statutes, and as a result have been remunerated under that law as a result of 2025 Wisconsin Act 24, which was enacted back in August of this past year. The statute number for simple battery charge that can now be heard in our municipal court has changed from 940.19 sub 1 to 940.60 sub 1. This update should be reflected in our municipal code. This ordinance just effectively does that to maintain compliance with Wisconsin Act 24.
So I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 09-1-25, amending section 9-1-1 of chapter 9 criminal code to remove 940-19 parents 1 and include 940.60 parents 1 Wisconsin State Battery in table 9-1-1.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 09-1-25. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 9B, consider, discuss, act on ordinance 09-2-25, requesting an amendment to the planned unit development PUD overlay zoning at 460 Marina Lane, parcel VA-132-13. Okay, Aaron explained this before. Does anybody have any questions for Aaron?
I'll move to approve the ordinance 09-2-25, requesting an amendment to the public development overlay zoning at 460 Marina Way, parcel 132-13 with staff conditions.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 09-2-25. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 9C, consider, discuss, act on resolution 9-1-25, commitment of financial support of TAP grant application for Main Avenue final connection. Brian Rickert.
All right, so in front of you guys tonight is a resolution for the Transportation Alternative Program, which is a program that WISTOP puts together, allows for a 80-20 split, 80% of the funds federally funded, 20% local funds. So with this, there's an application you fill out. It is for their planning year 2026 to 2030. We are applying for this project in 2030. It will piggyback the main Ave bridge reconstruction that the county plans to do over the Ashwaubenon Creek. So with that, we're just looking to see if we could get some financial support. This resolution would then accompany the application to make sure we would like to move forward with this final connection of essentially the main Ave trail. Right now, it stops at Ridge Road. There's a gap between Ridge Road and Mid Valley, which is kind of a broken segment in this east-west corridor.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Brian, what are they doing right now to the bridge? Are they just putting a thin overlay on it?
They are, yeah. So they're just doing some surface patching. That's not a long-term solution. The bridge itself, the girders and the deck itself are failing. This is essentially a maintenance level project that'll stretch it out maybe 3 to 5 years. But if you did ever look at the condition of the bridge before that, I mean, the rebar was completely exposed on that first mat and it's deteriorated.
Nice job on the TAP grant putting it together. I looked at it, but one question I have, did you put in there or mention that new development just behind the one that we just approved with a multifamily and everything else? Just saying, you know, here's a, and you might have put it in there, but I missed it, but.
No, nope, I didn't mention that. I somewhat am sometimes reserved because the DOT is delayed in getting through some lists, and I would hate for it to be that the development doesn't occur. I could maybe put something in there that, you know, there's
Some
plans for.
preliminary or, yeah.
I just don't want to commit to something that,
That's true.
hopefully it's going to get pushed forward, but I don't want to give a false hope that, the biggest thing is to focus on just the utilitarian travel.
Yeah.
The east-west corridor, you probably had noticed when you read through the grant, this is one of the very few connections that goes from Packerland all the way over to the Fox River in an east-west fashion. That provides for off-roadway accommodation, you know, or off-street accommodation for pedestrians.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve resolution R9-1-25, commitment of financial support of TAP grant application for Main Avenue final connection.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution R 9-1-25. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. 9D, consider, discuss, act on resolution R 9-2-25, approving the Intergovernmental Cooperative Agreement to satisfy eligibility for the Wisconsin Recycling Consolidation Grant for calendar year 2026. Brian Rickert.
All right, so this is kind of a rinse and repeat. We do this every year. We do apply for a recycling grant. We get usually between $75,000 and $80,000 back from the state based on our recycling program, which you guys are all very familiar with, so I won't get into the weeds of that. So what this is it just allows for a commitment saying that we're going to continue to work with BOW, which is Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago County, to bring our recycling there. They're going to take it to a single stream. They're going to push out educational documents to try to educate the public about recycling. There really is no financial portion of this. It just essentially is checking a box now saying we've passed the resolution so we can apply for the grant. So you'll see this every year, unfortunately.
Same thing, different year.
Yep.
All right. I'll move to approve the, where am I? Resolution R 9-2-25.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution R 9-2-25. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Number 10, items for business. A, consider, discuss, act on request for an extension to the 90-day statement of intent for District Poorhouse. Chris.
So District Poorhouse has learned that their build-out will not be done until December 5th. So they're just asking for an extension on the statement of intent, which is normally 90 days. They would like to push it out to December 5th, and they are here if you have any questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Can I just ask a quick question? Is April here? when you were here last time, you didn't get the exact license that you wanted. So obviously you're going ahead with it. And so you feel that you're going to be successful without having the liquor license now. Okay, great.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the 90-day, or the extension to the 90-day statement of intent. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10B, consider, discuss, act on draft 5-year capital improvement plan, CIP, for 2026 to 2030. Greg Wenholz.
Greg Wenholz is on vacation, so I think Sherry and I are tag teaming this maybe. Sherry's down there. So in your packet is the capital improvement plan. This plan was presented to you last month, basically in the same form. So at last month's meeting, we provided the information to give you more or less a month's time to review the information, discern over it, and then ultimately, hopefully deliberate over what the priorities are, in particular for 2026, right? So of course, it's a 5-year plan. The purpose of breaking it out over that extended period of time is to ensure you can kind of see the broader picture in determining and prioritizing what next year will bring. Ultimately, if the board were to, in theory, approve the capital improvement plan, it does not commit you to any of the projects in the next subsequent years, because each year we review this plan. But it does give staff direction then as to what the priorities are for 2026. And then we begin to implement that into our budgeting process for operating and capital purchases for next year. So that although you will have another kick at the cat, if you will, so to speak, as you go through the 2026 budgeting process, again, it just gives us an opportunity to prioritize and have an understanding of what the needs are that the board wishes to incorporate into next year's budget, recognizing these capital expenditures are the single greatest investment that the village really kind of puts forward on an annual basis. It's a pretty substantial investment by the taxpayers to complete these projects, so I think it requires and gives it its necessary due, if you will, in your deliberation and review. With that, I just want to note a couple quick things. We do, as we approach the capital improvement plan, we analyze and understand the priorities, but we also begin to look at the financial picture of those projects, such as, do we need to take out any long-term debt to support the purchase or the infrastructure purchase? And then we also analyze whether or not these projects fit within a tax incremental district and the project plan that is associated with it. Of note, TID number 3, it has reached its final expenditure year. That was last year. And so we are no longer able to complete projects within that TIF district. And then tax incremental district number 4, which we have used in the past, that one officially closed in April. So again, we no longer have the availability of using those districts to support some of the infrastructure projects in those areas. So the only tax incremental district that is available for us to use for that type of purpose would be tax incremental district number 5, which encompasses more or less that sports and entertainment district. Think of that Holmgren Way corridor, and extends down towards kind of Wabi Lane in some respects, towards the new Amplify Health Bellin building at the corner of Wabi and 41. So with that, department heads are here to talk through any projects or priorities that have been identified by staff. And then hopefully get feedback from you so that we know ultimately what your priorities are for the 2026 budget.
So I've gone through this, Joel, a couple different times, and I understand all of the projects and the items that every department wants. I think that some of it will change with the budget. So I will leave a lot of my comments for that.
I guess those comments will come up at budget time when you figure out what you're putting in the budget.
Right. I mean, this is, to me, the CIP is kind of a wish list. And if it can fit in the budget, you know, sometimes we can't fit it in the budget. So.
Yeah, I would just add that it certainly is a long-range list, but these are priorities that have been identified, whether it be an operational need, like a piece of equipment needs to be replaced, or something has been identified in a previous plan or an action by the village board, and so it's kind of moved its way up from a timing perspective and fits in 2026. So even if it's not done in '26, that still means it's probably a priority at some point and needs to be either addressed or it needs to be kind of removed from the plan. So if there is anything in next year that you're saying, well, I like to do the project, but I want to see the bigger picture for next year, that's fair and it's certainly understandable. But if it's a project, it's like, boy, that really is a wish list project, let's put that, I don't even want that really in the plan, or I want that so far out that we're really not talking about that. So we want to really make sure that the board is giving staff good, clear direction. So if it is truly a wish list item that could be pushed off for future years, let's do that. If it is something that is a priority for the village, but you want to see the broader picture financially for next year, it certainly makes sense to keep it within the CIP at this point until you get to your final budget review in October and November.
Yeah, I guess, I appreciate this as set up for the budgeting process, but until we actually see the budget, it's kind of tough to make a decision, should it be included or not, until we see the budget. So I agree with Mary, it's kind of tough to, at this point, to say, well, yeah, something's gotta go or not go.
I mean, I look at last year, last year was really tough, and even though we didn't raise our levy, everybody's taxes went up. So I'd hate to say that we're putting all this in and then, you would have to, raise the taxes to, I don't know, something in here and people go, oh my God, why did we do that? Because we don't have money, but, you spent it on that, so.
I mean, and a lot of these things in here are things that we're almost to the point where you have to do them. So, I
Right.
mean, some of it's
Correct.
gonna have to be there.
Correct.
It's just a matter, are there things that, okay, could we get along without some of them? You look at big ticket items, like I think, I don't know if, Rex, I know in yours, you had no, I'm just saying the road reconstruction. I absolutely agree. Needs to be done in Ashwaubenon.
Yeah.
But it's it's $500,000. So when you get to budget time, what happens? Does it fit or not? So I think until budget, I think this is a great list for everybody to keep pushing for. But until we actually get the numbers, can figure it out, it's tough to make any other judgments.
I have a quick question, and this we may talk about more budget, but the finance department, the ERP system, maybe we talked about that before, but that's a pretty good ticket item. What actually is that? Is that a whole new system?
And I'll let Sherry kind of address like the very specifics behind it. But what I will add to that is the cost that you see in the CIP is the initial setup cost. There is an annual operating or service cost to that. That annual service cost is comparable. In fact, I think it's slightly less than what we currently are paying for our existing ERP. So there is a operating reduction. It's fairly nominal compared to our existing costs, but the cost in the CIP is specifically to acquire the software and get it set up for our use. But Sherry can kind of walk through the specifics of what the software is, what it will do, and what it will ultimately replace.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is a system that's more streamlined. Right now, what we have is a system and all different modules have to be forced to work together, and it takes extra time, and our staff, I feel like, could be working on other things besides, that part of it. So with Tyler, we're looking at getting AP, AR, general ledger, budgeting. Everything will be integrated together, work together. It'll be faster for us. Hopefully the department heads would like it better too. I think there's a nice dashboard to show them, like, in real time, what is being spent, what's out there for approval. I think it's just a better system. Yes.
All right, Thank you.
So one of the, and Sherry mentioned it, but our general ledger system right now isn't the same software as like our payroll system. So there's that module integration between the two.
Sorry, I forgot the payroll part of it.
And that was really honestly one of the biggest drivers behind this, is that our existing payroll system is just let's just say undersized for the complexity of our operation, in particular in public safety when they're working 24-hour shifts or even 48-hour shifts to accommodate a situation where a shift overlaps a pay period gets really wonky. And so our existing payroll system can't accommodate that, so that manual entry and work every pay period to get it to function so people get paid accurately is a challenge for staff. This system would allow us, because they predominantly, our payroll system that we have now is for the private sector. This Tyler Munis system is designed for public sector. So they understand fire, police operations where you have 24, 48, or even 72-hour shifts.
Okay, and we've seen a demo of the payroll part of this, and, because it sounds like that's probably the biggest ticket item that you're going to improve, am I correct there?
I would say yes. And I haven't been a part of the payroll demo. It's mostly been like the payroll person.
Okay.
But yes, they are definitely on board for.
So let me ask you this question then. The parts that you have been part of, which I'm assuming is ledger, AP, AR, give me a rough estimate in a percent of what do you think we're gonna be saving time? I know what the ERP guys are gonna tell you, because guess what I used to do? Is to sell ERPs. So anyway, I know what they're telling you, but what do you think you're gonna save?
I think, well, being a former Tyler Munis user at a different municipality,
Okay.
definitely say that I could probably save at least 30% of my time by switching systems, and I could be doing other things.
That's significant.
It is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do we need a motion to approve this CIP plan? 5-year CIP?
I think if a motion to approve the draft CIP and direct staff to prioritize the projects identified into the 2026 budget, I think that's certainly a relevant motion. Again, just to reiterate, it doesn't approve and authorize the completion of any of these projects. They would require a formal funding mechanism as a part of the 2026 budget.
I'll make the motion to approve this preliminary CIP and direct staff to prioritize projects into the 2026 budget. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the draft 5-year CIP for 2026 to 2030. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10C, consider, discuss, act on amendments to the alcohol operator license approval policy. Now, before we, well, I'm sorry, Joel, I'll let you explain the changes, but then there's one more change that we might possibly talk about.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. So in your packet is a alcohol operator license policy. This policy was created, I believe, as far back as 2023. If you recall, we amended our code of ordinances to permit, as allowed under statutes, administratively the clerk to issue and grant licenses for operators for the village. In the past, those operators would come before the board every month and get approved that way. So to expedite the approval process, we enacted that ordinance amendment to allow for that. As part of that process, we developed some guidelines then that would assist village administration as well as the Public Works and Protection Committee and Village Board in the event an individual who had been denied an operator license had issued or requested an appeal. So basically, it would establish a baseline for what the denials would come from, and then the process in which an individual could file an appeal for that administrative denial. Recently, we've had a few instances where individuals have filed for an appeal And they've done so in a manner that it was in great duration of time for when the actual denial occurred. And so administratively, we wanted to look at ways to amend the policy to establish a timeline for which individuals can actually file their appeal. In addition to that, what that timeline would be in the event that an individual was denied a license and they failed to file a successful appeal, how long it would take before they could reapply for said license and then be reconsidered. In addition to that, we had a requirement within the old policy that if an individual failed to admit or include a prior arrest or conviction on their application, that omission would be an automatic denial, and if an individual wishes to appeal that determination, that appeal would again come to committee. What this amendment does is it allows the chief of public safety or their designee, in the event that a denial occurs because of an omission, they have an opportunity to make contact with that applicant and verify whether or not it was just a simple error on their part, and if so, allow them to amend their application to reflect that omission and then reevaluate the application for consideration. If an individual meets all of the other requirements to obtain the license, they would then be granted. The license would then be issued by the clerk's office. In the event that that omission further explains and justifies a denial based on the standards applied in the policy, they would again be denied and then would certainly be able to file an appeal with the committee. So those are really kind of the basic level changes in your packet. There is a red line copy to kind of show specifically where those changes within the policy are. There is the formal policy in a clean version for your consideration, and I've included some other references as well related to the issuance of operator licenses and permits, as well as rules under the Department of Revenue for intoxicating liquors. I know Mary has a question or maybe a thought process related to an additional change to the policy, so I will let Mary kind of explain that.
Yeah, after this went through the Public Works and Protection Committee, somebody brought it to my attention that they felt that some of the people that were denied a license because they had one OWI should be allowed to have a operator's license because one OWI they didn't feel was bad. So, that's not a determination that I should be able to make, right? So I said, well, since we're talking about changing the policy, it should be at the committee or at the board if that would be a thought process for the board. I did ask Chris to give me some statistics on the denied licenses. So in an 18-month period from March of 2024 to September of 2025, there were 57 denials. 25 of them had OWI convictions, and 18 of them had just one. So I just wanted that statistic because they felt that there's a lot of people that can't get employment in some of these jobs because they had just one OWI. Now, I know if you have one OWI, you cannot get a license for 2 years. That's part of the policy. So I guess I want to ask the board, do you want to go down that road? I'm going to ask the chief, what are your thoughts on that? Because, our officers have to handle the people who are selling liquor or beer or whatever.
Right. So, Madam President, actually, it's a conviction with an OWI within 2 years that you would violate guideline number 3, and then you wouldn't be eligible under our licensing. And I guess as you talk like that, or in regards to this changes and that specifically, I think the responsibility falls on that person, number one, that's serving the alcohol. So we have these guidelines because we want people to be holding themselves accountable because they're also serving alcohol. And if they're over-serving or they don't have that care, and I'm trying to use that somewhat loosely, but we want them to be responsible as well in their personal life with these guidelines that are presented, as well as when they're out there serving people, knowing when they're over serving someone, when to cut somebody off, when someone maybe shouldn't be driving, to take all that. And with these guidelines, when someone is denied a license, it doesn't mean they can't be a bartender. They can't be serving that alcohol by themselves. They can't be listed as the person with the license. So they can still work, and they can still work in a bar or in a gas station, but they can't have that license, which means they can be the only one there serving that alcohol. So I wouldn't suggest changing this at all. Again, I think we can pride ourselves on being strict and holding people accountable. I do that for our department, and I'd certainly do that for anyone that's serving alcohol as well.
I agree. I think about it for myself, if we eliminate this requirement and somebody sells beer at a gas station or sells whatever at a bar, and then something terrible happens, and then it comes out, well, this guy had an OWI. You know, it's like, how would I feel that we granted the license? And that just makes the decision easy for me.
I agree with the chief and what he's saying. We got to look at it as employing people in our community. They made a mistake. You know, one time, you know, I've got a few people that I know that had an OWI that you were there at the wrong time is the answer I got when I talked to police officers when they got picked up. They never had one since, and they haven't, and I'm going for years, they haven't, you know, they didn't abuse the alcohol system anymore. But by keeping it the way it is, we're not denying employment. So they serve their time, and they're still able to serve the alcohol, but they're not the licensed one. It's not that we're taking a job away from them. We're letting them work, but you need somebody there other than them to have that permit.
Well, and I think the key is that the 3 years, you know, it's within a 2-year time frame. Okay, once you get outside of that, okay, you know, then, so within 2 years, that's pretty new. So I think the way it is the way it's presented is fine.
Yeah, I agree that we should leave it the way it is. And I also have a question for Chris in regard to the difference between an operator's license that we give as a municipality and an operator's permit that the state just enacted in January of this year. If you can explain the difference between those two things and how someone serving in our community can have an operator's permit from the state and what the background check and how that all works.
So the law that went into effect is you can get a bartender license from the state to work the entire state. So if you are a person, say, that works for a Quick Trip and they need help, you know, in De Pere, Green Bay, and, you know, they can go anywhere. If it's more of a mom and pop, I don't think they'd spend that $200, because if they're in Ashwaubenon, then they pay $60 for 2 years. The question that we kind of have here is, okay, we have our strict guidelines. How does the state do it?
Yeah, that was my
That we
question.
don't know.
Yeah. And anybody can get a permit through the state and forgo ours, because they wouldn't have to have ours if they have a state one, correct?
Correct.
And then it's $200 for 2 years then for that license as well?
I believe it's 2 years.
Okay.
Well, it's unfortunate, but that's something that's out of our control, so there's much we can do about it. So I'm gonna make the motion to adopt the amended operator's license approval policy as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the amendments to the alcohol operator license approval policy that was presented in item 10C. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10D, consider, discuss, act on village trail and sidewalk winter maintenance areas for the 2025-2026 winter season. Brian Rickert.
All right. Last month, it was brought to my attention, or it was brought up in the village board meeting, that we wanted to potentially look at reconsidering what trails or pedestrian accommodations we currently provide winter maintenance activities. So with that, you do have a map of the current existing facilities that we provide winter snow plowing on. With that, you can see the bulk of it is the trail system along the west side of the Fox River, and then all of the bike routes, or sorry, school routes that take sidewalks that allow kids to get to school. With that, there is a section in our municipal code that does spell out these maintenance responsibilities as to who's responsible where. With that, I will open the floor, see if there is any interest. The one thing I would say is the last 2-3 winters have been quite mild. We've seen that not only in our budgets, whether it's labor, materials, salt, stuff like that. We've had some pretty mild winters. Hopefully, maybe it'll continue like that. But I do want to make sure that we don't overcommit ourselves to biting off more than we can truly chew. The one thing that I would say is clearing the snow off from the trails and sidewalks is generally a secondary operation unless there is school. We do make sure to get those school routes cleaned. But when it's for recreational travel, not utilitarian travel, it is definitely a second priority in regards to getting snow first removed off from our roadways.
So, Brian, when we first originally started plowing some of the trails, because we never did plow trails, we were going to have our public works crew do it, or parks crew, and then we were going to try to see how many hours it was going to cost us, just so that we would have a round number of what we would budget, because we were actually going to contract this out, right? And we just haven't been able to get a handle on how an actual winter would be with plowing.
Right. I'll be honest, I have not ran any numbers as to how much it costs us to do it. Of course, we do have the fleet already, in our inventory that we do use for it. With that, I would have to definitely touch base to see, each operator, how long it takes to do the route. I don't know if we'd want to divide out the sidewalks separate from the trail system because, ultimately the sidewalks we've committed to doing snow removal on the sidewalks as we receive federal funding through Safe Routes to School. But the trails, you could consider them a 3-seasons trail, or we could have them be 4-season trail. But it ultimately is a decision. I know we'd like to see if there'd be a possibility that we could take the time to get a formal policy, written up as to how we go about determining what trails we do. For instance, Packerland Trail, we don't remove the snow on it, but someone else does. And there's segments of it that are in Hobart and segments of it that are in Ashwaubenon. So just getting a good handle on what our priorities are going to be, the policy would be kind of able to spell that out.
That was kind of why I brought it up, was to see what is our policy, or what is our thinking on it. Obviously, I would like to see the trails plowed, but just because I think Ashwaubenon has amazing opportunities for outdoor activities, and I hate to see it wasted in the winter. But it's a group decision. So what is our policy? And obviously, it's not free to plow it. But maybe we allow for volunteer groups to do it, or, make naming rights or something. This is the such and so trail and they're gonna plow it, or I don't know. There's other options out there. I know they all come with pluses and minuses, but I guess we need to know how much it costs.
So are you kind of referring to, Kelly, if we would start to plow some of them that we aren't plowing today? For example, I'll use Ashwaubenon, because you walk that almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of what you're referring to start to plow that?
Right. Well,
Gotcha.
and, do we want to keep plowing the ones we're plowing?
Mm-hmm.
I vote yes, but.
Well, I do question, Wabi Lane. I know it's a beautiful trail, but in the wintertime, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes out to out to Packerland and stops, just because, like, to your point, Brian, because we aren't doing the Packerland Trail.
Right.
So if we were doing the Packerland Trail, it'd make complete sense to do the Wabi. But when I look at Wabi right now, I kind of go, well, where's it going? It's not, it's going to Schneider. That's it.
Correct.
And I also kind of wanted to brainstorm as a group about adding in funds to these projects when we build a new trail. Is there a way to front load money into it for maintenance, so we don't have to worry about the budget later? If we're gonna say our policy is we're gonna plow these trails, so now the trail doesn't cost this much, it costs this much to do it, you know what I mean? Or if we don't wanna do that, I don't know.
I would want to talk to the residents and see how they're using the trails, because the minute you start plowing them, you're taking away cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. So just because somebody wants to walk doesn't, I mean, you might, if you start plowing all of them, you might be taking away things that are actually getting used.
True.
I don't do them things, but I would want to know how our residents and how our trails are being used. So I would actually probably want to do some type of research as to, you know, who's doing what would be a good, you know, direction to go.
Yeah, could I just add a couple comments to some of the comments that were made just now or over this discussion, just real quickly. So certainly, when we plan for and put projects into our capital improvement plan, I think it's certainly a worthwhile effort and something that maturing capital improvement plan will have with that idea, to Kelly's point of, okay, this trail costs $1 million to install, but what is it gonna cost to maintain over the course of the life for operating or for general routine maintenance? And as we develop and continually mature our capital improvement plan, that's information and data that would be relevant. I would caution a little bit about setting aside funds, because it becomes a generational equity issue. You're setting aside funds today. The people, the taxpayers today, are then paying for a benefit that future taxpayers do not have to pay for. So you would want to identify it, but generationally, from an equity standpoint, you'd want the people that are using it in the future to pay for the maintenance of it for that time period. So I would just be cautious with that. I think you want to identify it so you can plan for it and understand it, so that if you do install a $1 million trail, what is this actually going to cost us to maintain then? And that may be a basis for your decision as to whether or not you're going to include the trail. The other thing that I just always provide a little caution to, and Ashley's probably going to cringe at me a little bit, but when we start maintaining what we'll call side paths along a roadway, there are statutory requirements that sidewalks be maintained free of ice and snow. Now, what free of ice and snow means, that's probably case law issues, but you do have a requirement. When we start designating these trails that run alongside corridors, roads, highways, streets, they could be determined or considered sidewalks, which then means you are now maintaining them as a sidewalk. It's, again, Ashley might cringe at me, but it may be a challenge in the future that you've taken what is now a sidewalk and made it a trail and no longer attempt to maintain it. So you have to be a little bit careful. Recreational trails, like in Ashwaubenon, that is a recreational trail. It does not run along highway right-of-way. It's not within the right-of-way of the road. So it is likely not going to be considered a sidewalk for that purpose. It could be a recreational trail, but the more we install side paths into and adjacent to highways, and we maintain them to be a pedestrian way in the winter, we may lose that flexibility in calling it a trail and discontinue maintaining it. I'm not saying that for certain. Ashley's kind of shaking her head yet. Yeah, that could happen.
I agree with that. I also would be really careful about how we would word any policy with regard to maintenance of our recreational trails. Even though it has a recreational purpose, are we obligating ourselves to be out there X number of weeks or X number of days after some sort of weather event? We don't want to open ourselves up to liability, depending on the wording of that policy. So, two-part.
Yeah, so at present, to kind of answer Kelly's question too, we don't have a formal written policy outside of what was included in our ordinance that was presented as part of the packet, and the map in which we've developed as a part of this ongoing annual discussion about winter and snow maintenance. So administration would, certainly recommend, if the board desires, to draft a policy that would be a formal written policy for the board to consider. And then from there, that gives us guidance, and then you can address those issues that Ashley has identified as far as what the maintenance expectations are. Because, and we know just even based on our conversations here at board meeting, each of you may have a different expectation of what that maintenance standard should be. So by developing that policy now, we as staff have that clear direction as to what that is.
Well, that brought up a question for me when you were saying we have liability for plowing and stuff. I grew up on a sidewalk that was on a safe route to school, and we had to shovel it. The residents had to shovel it because we would do that first before even our driveway, because it had to be by a certain time and whatever. And then the plow would go through and shove snow right on the sidewalk that we just shoveled, and we shovel it again. So I get if the path is along a roadway, it doesn't make sense really to probably plow that, because then the snow plow is gonna go through and cover it up again, or I don't know. Maybe we do it once a week, or I don't know what the answer is, but why are we plowing the safe route to school and not the residents who live on that sidewalk?
Yeah, I think some of the board members that maybe have been on the board for quite some time or have a little bit further history behind it. This is what I suspect to be it. Obviously, it would be a very politically unpopular decision to go back to the residents that haven't maintained their sidewalks for snow and ice and now say you have to do it. I'm not saying you can't do that. You certainly can. You have the authority and the prerogative as a board to do that, but just, I want you to be cautious that it would be very politically unpopular. And I think that's probably why it's never changed, certainly. But I also, having worked in other communities similar to an Ashwaubenon where you don't have sidewalk on every street, like if you're in the city of De Pere or the city of Green Bay, for the most part, Appleton, oftentimes these communities require every adjacent homeowner to maintain or property owner to maintain their sidewalk. And that's because everyone has one. So the burden of responsibility is shared across the community. In our community, not every street has a sidewalk. And so that burden is then placed disproportionately to those that do have it, even though those that are walking on it may live a block over and don't have a sidewalk.
Okay.
So that's kind of my assumption based on my historical understanding of not only Ashwaubenon, but very similar communities where they're limited with the amount of sidewalk.
I am taxing my brain here, but many years ago, we didn't have sidewalks, and the kids were walking to school, and they wanted them to have a safe place to walk. So we got the Safe Routes to School grants, and the village board at that time, or town board, made the determination that they would plow the sidewalk because the residents did not want them. Now, the one thing about many years ago, when we started talking about this trail sidewalk plowing, it was during National Night Out, when I went to, I've gone to every area every year for the National Night Out. And I asked all the residents that were at the National Night Outs that I went to, and I asked them if they wanted those trails plowed. Do you think we should plow the trails? And the large majority of the people said no, that they did not want to have the trails plowed. One of the things you have to always consider too is that how many public works workers do we have, Brian?
If you're just looking at our operations, you do not include the utilities, there's 17.
And how many do we have in Park and Recs?
3.
4. So we have 21 guys that not only do those sidewalks, not only do those trails, not only plow our roads, they do all the school parking lots. They do the ice center parking lot. So there's a lot of operation that goes on. So that's what you have to think about, before we start adding trails. So anyway.
You know, the only comment I got on this, if we were talking streets, we'd be doing all kinds of studies. Do we need stoplights? How many, what's the traffic flow? It's the same thing with these trails. Let's do a study on how they're used. You know, we're trying to please 1% of our population, using trails, bicycles, whatever. We spend a lot of time discussing this stuff. And I just don't see anywhere where this is ever going to come down to a definite answer on how we're going to take care of it. Because we are just trying to help the 1%ers, and there's just not a decent way to satisfy everybody. So my answer is do a study on it. Get how many people walk the trail? We put black rubber hoses across the road just to see a count. Put something there that we know if the trail's even being used. You know, I was just telling my wife, wait till we get, how about the goose problem we got on trails? Wait till people are gonna whine about that. So,
I agree with Gary. You almost want to know how they really want to be used. That would be my only comment. I would, again, leave it up to the residents of Ashwaubenon.
I just have a couple comments in regard to Wabi Lane Trail and the sand acres that we currently plow. Mary's comment was she talked to people and they said, no, when I was out campaigning, those happened to both be in my ward. People want them plowed. They were reaching out when I was talking to them, giving me some information on what you would like. The people in Sand Acres were so excited when that was getting plowed. In fact, just the other day, a lady said to me, I'm so glad this is getting plowed. Please continue that. And I said, well, we're looking at it at our meeting tonight. It may not continue, so you might want to, I think if we go ahead and stop doing this, we need to let the residents know, because Gary says 1%, it's a lot more than that. And Wabi saying it doesn't go anywhere, my whole neighborhood goes and uses that. That's the closest trail. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but it's safe. They can walk along there, they can get back. You cannot walk on Wabi in the winter unless you can jump over a snowbank to get the heck out of the way. The other question I'd have is for Ashley. We have 2 spots on this map that are, I believe, are sidewalks that we do not maintain in the winter. And if I understood Joel correctly, state statute requires us to take care of sidewalks. There's a sidewalk in Hidden Valley. It is on the north side of Wabi that is not maintained. And then there is a sidewalk on Layden Drive, which is not maintained. The one to Layden Drive goes to the sports complex and has never been done. So can we legally not maintain a sidewalk and leave it with snow?
Are the abutting property owners maintaining? What do you mean when you say it's not maintained? Are the
No
sidewalks
one
being
clears them.
cleared?
They're left with snow covered all year, or if we have snow, I should say. They are not cleared.
Are
So-
they in
And
front
it
of
says right on the
residents?
map here, and they have never been cleared.
I don't know without looking at that part of the village in particular. Typically, what we do is we expect abutting property owners to maintain sidewalks. For natural accumulations, if they remain for a period of more than 3 weeks, then we become liable. And so that's why a number of communities will expect for, let's say a residential property owner should clear the sidewalk. If they don't do that within a certain number of hours, we're gonna come out there, do it, and charge it back. If it's sitting for a period in excess of 3 weeks and there's not some other sort of exception, then that could be an area that we need to look at. But I just don't know that I have all the information. to
Yeah, if
tell
you could
one way or
check
the
into
other.
that maybe, because one is located in Park, is in Hidden Valley Park, and the other one is adjacent to basically some multifamily, really close to the Ashwaubenon Sports Complex. So if you could check and see what the rules are for sidewalks, and if they need to be cleared,
Sure.
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Who would typically, wouldn't whoever owns a multifamily, wouldn't they be responsible for clearing that in front of them?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at Layden Drive, there's a portion of sidewalk, it appears, that runs along Cornerstone or the sports complex. And then there's a portion that runs past that apartment complex. So Tracy, what you're suggesting or saying is that the sidewalk that runs past Cornerstone or the sports complex, including the section that would be by the, Layden Drive Estates apartment complex, that is not being maintained? And that's
None of it's
indicated
cleared.
on the map as well as not being plowed? We could look at that. And then the one that is on Wabi next to Hidden Valley Park, is that what you're?
Yes. There's a sidewalk there that's not cleared.
Okay. And then there's a gravel, that's all crusher dust trail then that it connects to, correct? Rex?
Correct.
On Packer land?
Everything on the interior of the park is gravel.
Okay.
And the exterior north side of Wabi is sidewalk that goes from the corner of Wabi and Packerland to the
Parking lot.
So the vast majority of both of those areas are areas that are adjacent to property owned by the village. So my understanding of what would be required is either A, we would need to maintain it over that period that Ashley had described, or formally close the sidewalk for public use. So we would have to sign it appropriately, although I think that would still be questionable at some point. So that certainly is an area that we're adding length of maintenance responsibilities. So if we're looking to add some additional trails to that, we potentially have just added a few 100 feet of additional sidewalk to maintain.
When we do plow like the gravel trails, how much restoration is required in spring to go back and clean it up? How much labor are we putting into
We
it?
don't plow.
I'll let
gravel.
Rex answer that. I think, I don't believe we do any gravel or crusher dust trails.
No,
Got it.
That's correct.
they're all paved, yeah.
This is a little off topic, but it's in my area and it was brought up by residents. If you look right, almost right in the middle of your map, if you go up Hanson, and you'll notice that the sidewalk stops right there. It's right by Nicolay Bank, and then you'll see there's a block gap there before it picks up to another sidewalk. I don't know if something can be done to kind of connect this. I mean, I can think of it, so, those residents on that street on Ponderosa, I'm sure would not be happy to get a sidewalk. You could go maybe in front of Nicolay National Bank and then swing around and hook back up. Rex, I'm kind of looking at you to Pioneer then, over on the side and swing back around. But I just want to point out, just because it's so clear on this map, there's a gap there that I think we should probably look at. Maybe that's something for budget for next year to figure out what would we want to do with that to fill that gap. Because if we look at, I know there are people that are walking from the apartments down there and are walking to Pioneer School. And they're having to make their way through the neighborhoods there to do that. And the only reason I know that, because I've seen them walk in the mornings. Again, I apologize, it's a little off topic for the snowplow.
It isn't though, I mean,
Okay, there's a resident that would like to,
I'll make a motion to open the floor.
Second?
motion and a second to open the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? State your name and address for the record, please.
Jennifer Wellhouse, 2190. In reference to all these trails, and this has been on my mind since I moved back to Ashwaubenon, I live right next door to Fort Howard Park, and I know that hasn't come up as you guys have been talking, but I do walk the river trail that has now been put in there as well. And in reference to both of them, I walk them daily, almost. And the Riverwalk Trail, a lot of people are using it, and I would just like to say, I know that, the trails can, being a recreation trail, because it goes all the way to Ashwaubenon, and if you actually start at the OC instead of where the Riverwalk Trail sign is, it's actually a 3-mile walk for the whole thing. And a lot of people walk it. I mean, people are walking their dogs, people are biking, it is used. And I don't know that it would be used for other things like snowmobiling or anything like that, being right next to the river. I do think it would be a good idea because that is a great place to get exercise all year long. So I don't know as much about the Packerland Trail or the Wabi Trail, but specific to that trail, if we're also looking at having a CBRF put in there right next to, I'm a social worker. If we're looking at having a CBRF put in there right next, and apartments that were potentially gonna be 55 and older, which are no longer gonna be that, and we're gonna need them to get out and get exercise, are we not thinking about how that could benefit those people as well, to have that trail and have that access to that? Even if we're not looking at, all winter long, but even just for part of it, or once a month, or once every couple of weeks, having that access for them to be
I
able
know
to
you
do
don't
that.
have access to our, but they are being plowed.
I mean, the trail part there. Yeah, it's just a consideration just to bring to the
No,
board.
it's in the plan that it will be plowed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
The only,
the
the
other
only
thing I was
part that
gonna say-
won't is going over the bridge and into Ashwaubenon.
correct. The Ashwaubenon part is not gonna be, but the rest of the trail will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing I was gonna say is over at Fort Howard Park, some of us, me living right next door to it, when that parking lot is plowed, a lot of times, and no offense to whichever one of you guys' team does it, when the plows go through, they sometimes plow it right up to the access where you walk through to cross through the park. So even if some of us, we're gonna want.
Prairie Street?
I don't live on Prairie, I live on.
Are you
Sidewalk.
talking about Prairie Street, though?
Prairie Street is 2 blocks over. Yeah. But if they plow it right up to there, then we can't even access the park. So even if we wanted to help and do some things when we're trying to go into the park during the winter, we have to climb over this mound of snow to even get into the park. So if we could even just have them plow off to the side a little bit so that we can access it, I don't mind throwing a snow blower through there once in a while. I'm sure some of the other neighbors wouldn't either. And like Kelly was saying, if we can get some of the neighbors to pitch in and do some of those things, maybe we're not looking at using paid resources, but we can look at some natural resources in the area that would help out the community, people, volunteers, looking at different resources like that, and natural resources instead of funded resources. And it's just a thought. I don't know if it's going to work, but if we have some grassroots people out there trying to get people involved, and make it the community that we want it to be, the community, how it started, how Ashwaubenon actually began, and we have people out there talking about it, it could work. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Question here for Ashley. Years ago, there was a item brought up about volunteers plowing, and I think there's liability issues with that, is there not?
There could be, yeah, I would be reluctant.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to close the floor.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to close the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Okay, there is no recommendation on that. This was
Yeah,
for
it's really up to
discussion.
the board because we don't have a formal policy to really discern over. However, obviously, if the board wishes to make adjustments to our winter maintenance map, that gives us direction then as to what we have to look towards for next season. As was recommended before from administration, if the board desires, we can certainly look at formulating a policy for future consideration. That certainly can be done in a motion as well.
Well, I think at this point, we're very close to getting into this winter season. I don't know how much we can impact this at this point. I almost think we have to go forward with the way we've done it in the past. And I hate to throw another little task on Brian's plate, but it would be nice to try to get an estimate of what it's costing us to do that maintenance. I don't know if that ends up in a line item in the budget. Again, I don't know how you're doing that budget part of it, Brian, but if we could try to figure out what is this costing us to maintain the different trails? And that goes back to Kelly's point then to, okay, if we add another trail or whatever, okay, how much more are we adding? And I'm not asking you to do that visionary thing, Brian, I'm just saying, can you tell us what's it costing us now?
That's what I was gonna say too, is let's do that, let's get some numbers for this year. And I almost think we don't really want a policy yet because we have more flexibility without it at this point. So I was not gonna move to request that you draft a policy yet, but having those cost figures would help for the next time we talk about it.
I would like to know just how many hours it takes, not necessarily cost, but just in case we are gonna hire it out, I'd like to get a rough idea of what we're looking at.
Yeah, that won't be a problem. I mean, ultimately, I can talk with our operations supervisor, figure out how many guys, about how long. And
Yeah.
generally, we have about between 20 and 23 snow events every year. Granted, you know, some of them are handled differently, but, you know, it'd be not that challenging to calculate. Factor in some fuel costs. I don't know if we want to get into the weeds of, you know, fleet depreciation, stuff like that. Since it is equipment that we do have, but it is something that you have cut edges, you have a pretty minimal amount of salt, but there is sometimes salt that's used, stuff like that. With that, are you thinking that you would have the trails separate than the sidewalks?
Yes.
As dollar numbers are separate or together?
I would wanna see them separate.
Yeah, separate them out.
You know, Brian, that trail, that's your last priority on a snowstorm, isn't it?
Trails, yes.
Your
Sidewalks,
last
no.
priority, you know, and I think we've got, isn't it a 2-inch, snowfall before we plow?
On the trails?
Yes.
Or- No, we plow them, if time allows, we plow them after every event.
Oh, after every event. But every snowfall you get can be as of different depths. It takes you longer to plow wet snow than it does dry snow.
Correct.
Takes you longer to plow a 12-inch snowfall versus a 2-inch snowfall.
Right, yeah,
You're
definitely.
gonna need a lot of statistics to come up with a round number to say.
It will
what
be a
it's
round
costing.
number.
I don't want to throw another wrench in the thing, but I just for clarification on this, I need to bring up the Ashwaubenon Sports Complex with the ice center because our guys plow that lot and there's a lot of sidewalks that aren't necessarily recreational sidewalks, but they're sidewalks that the people use to get from the parking lot to the ice center. And that's a whole separate agreement with the user agreement that we have with Cornerstone LLC. So is that in or out of what Brian needs to figure out time-wise?
I would say out.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say out.
Okay, I just want to clarify, just because I know that'll come up when we start.
That's a good question, yeah, I think that should be out.
I'm assuming all village facilities would be out, like, for instance, Village Hall. There's some
Correct,
here that
yeah,
we removed.
absolutely out.
Right.
Okay.
You can take my snow shoveling time out of the equation, Brian.
I guess for me, I'm kind of wondering, like, are we better off to really look at hiring that out versus owning and maintaining the equipment and
That's a challenging one. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, winter season is a season that, you know, we generally, I don't want to say we have time,
Yeah.
but we're not stretched near as thin as we are during the construction season. I mean, that's when we're strapped. You know, we already own the equipment, so not saying that we couldn't sell it and contract it out. It's definitely something that we could do, but there is also some benefits to self-performing work, you know, from a control standpoint too.
Yep.
But
those are just questions that I'll probably have when we have a better.
Chris, we could get maybe a good comparison at least, because the Fox River Trail has been cleared they contracted for several years now from the Porlier trailhead all the way down to Heritage Road. And they have money, they would be able to tell us how much they've spent every year on that, and that's like 6 miles of trail. It would at least give you an idea of what has been spent, probably. I think it's been cleared for maybe 5-6 years now. And that could be comparable to any of the trails that we have in Ashwaubenon, at least to give us a ballpark.
the benefit to the snow removal on that trail is it's straight. So every time you put a bend or a kink in any sort of sidewalk trail, anything like that, the amount of time it adds is very considerable. Anybody that removes snow, they know. I mean, if you're going straight, you can make hay. You can make a lot of time. But once you start bending corners and putting angles, it adds a lot of time.
Yep. That's why I would want to know how long it takes your guys. They're obviously very good at it, so they're efficient. But once you have that hour amount, then you can easily put a dollar amount per hour, and then we're set.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Everybody understand their marching orders? Okay. 10E, consider, discuss, act on traffic calming options for Cormier Road. Joel.
Okay, this item came at the request of trustee Atkinson, I think at the last village board meeting, just requesting the item be placed on the agenda for just general discussion with key staff. Public safety had put out their speed board for a period of several days, several weeks, both in east and westbound directions, so I know Chief Rowling has data on that. And then public works staff, engineering staff are certainly available to discuss whatever potential options would assist in traffic calming. So I'm just gonna kind of leave it open-ended, and I know we wanted just a general conversation.
I have gotten a lot of phone calls lately for heavy traffic, blowing stop signs, excessive speed, all through the whole area of it. I mean, they're not wrong. On my way down here today, I literally just paced behind everybody to see how fast they would go, and I was at 43 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. And that's every single car. There's at least 10 cars ahead of me were running that speed. So, I mean, the residents are not wrong, but what can we do in the short term and long term to slow that down? I mean, we have problems with extremely heavy traffic at key times of the day. You can't pull out of Pilgrim Way. I mean, what can we do? There's got to be a solution to this. Do we have to look at like long-term putting a roundabout somewhere and then a traffic light? Or, I mean, you guys are the ones that do this. You guys know this area, so I leave it up to what you guys think. But I mean, obviously public safety can't be sitting there. There's not enough officers to give everybody a ticket that's running that speed.
No, we can.
Extra revenue, chief.
And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because I'm sure Ashley would be like, I don't want all those, but Ashley, I guess if we had our traffic officer, which we are working very hard at attaining again when we get our staffing up, as a traffic officer, or a former traffic officer, I had no problem sitting at certain spots like that.
Sure.
Chris. I'd like to share with you, though, our traffic data that we had here in regards to the speed. So I'll never say that it's perfect, but I also never say that it's as big of a problem that I think we kind of sometimes perceive it to be. And I say that because the numbers don't lie, and if I can just kind of show you here a little bit, if you look on the side here, the left-hand side is the time that we have in regards to when this radar board took speeds for us. So again, 0-100 obviously is 12 a.m., and it goes all the way down to, of course, 11 o'clock, which is 2300 military time. And then if you look on top, across the 1 to 5, all the way down to 101 to 150, and God forbid if we had any of those, I'd be out there again. But we don't. But this is the speeds that we have. So again, in this 6-day period alone that I picked here, I want you just to take a look at the average speed, if you would, for the entire day. 30.3, and one of our highest, I believe, is like a 31.7. I believe that was in here at 5 o'clock. And if you look at the average speed on the bottom, if I can get that to pop up for you, sorry. The average speed is 31. If you also look at the gray area here, and again, at the bottom, I'm going to show you, this is between the speed limit of 26 to 30 and 31 to 35. At the very bottom, this is our highest traffic count. I'm not saying that we don't have people going 35 to 40. Chris, you're 43 in here. You're 46 to 50. As you can look across this board here, it dwindles down, which means, yes, we do have vehicles that travel outside this norm, but it's not all the time. And it happens, but it doesn't happen just here. It happens, unfortunately, across all of our roads. Can something be done? My first thing is, yes, we need to have traffic enforcement down there. We need to stop cars. We need to have discretion to cite, write written warnings, etc. When you see that, that certainly helps. I don't know if this is a huge problem. I'm only showing you kind of a sample here, again, it doesn't mean it happens, because at one time can upset anybody. No matter if they went past my house when I lived on Mesa, that car's speeding, why isn't something being done? I mean, that was always my first concern too. So we certainly get that, but you also hit the point too, we can't put officers, I don't have enough officers out to be in front of every one of your homes, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to make an excuse there, because that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a safe community. So if there's a concern, what can we do? I'd love to see a roundabout at Pilgrim Way and Cormier to help the schooling, but I don't know if it can be done that way just due to the waterway that's there, due to the construction with the interstate and, of course, property owners in that area. But it doesn't mean we won't stop. It doesn't mean we don't continue to put out radar speeds like we have to let people also see this, because again, every one of these speeds here, these people were able to see as well. They were able to see how fast they're going.
Well, if we put an actual traffic light at that corner, because I agree, I don't know that we can fit a roundabout in there, probably not enough room. But if we'd put a traffic light in there, and then, okay, yeah, maybe it doesn't operate. That corner scares me that somebody's gonna get hit and gonna get hit hard because of the youngness of the drivers that use that particular intersection, and to the speeds that Chris is referring to, because I've sat there and I went through that almost daily when I was up at the high school. And yeah, it's a tough intersection to get out of. People are, I see the 40-mile-an-hours and, you got 20 people. And it's interesting, where it's high, guess what time of day it is? It's when that traffic is there. So that's the bad thing. You have the high times at the time when the traffic is the highest. And that's probably the thing that jumps out at me when I look at your statistics here, Chief. That's kind of what I look at. I'm going, yeah. So I don't know if we can research into could there be a traffic light there, and maybe it doesn't operate 24/7. Maybe it only operates at designated times. And but I know that can be a problem to not have it operate all the time as well. The other thing I know is that once they pass that section, as you get down to what I would call the downhill section of Cormier and heading out towards the Smith Park area, and that people really pick up as to when you're crossing Shady. And they're really flying there. So I don't know if those two intersections, if we would do something there, and I don't know if there's research out there that can tell us, hey, look, if we put a traffic light at Shady and we put a traffic light at Pilgrim Way and have them operating, would that slow the traffic down through the whole neighborhood?
And I know Brian's going to sneak in here as well, but I think part of the problem, and again, I also lived in that area, so I know Shady Lane and Cormier very, very well. And I also knew some of the problems with officers. And again, this is from 10 years ago. This is till today. It's impatience. No one will take the time and the patience they should have to wait until it's clear to go through. They're upset because I had to sit in front of this car that didn't go when I thought it was safe to go. So now they're doing this.
Agreed.
And I'm not, trying to minimize that, but we need to have more patience around here, and we don't have that. And we could put a roundabout in there, and we could still have accidents because someone says, "Oh, it's my turn to go. I'm just going to go because I'm tired of all these cars coming." So yes, I see that, but some of this also has to fall on drivers. And we talk about driving down Cormier Road at a high rate of speed. Yes. What I do like, and I've seen, is that all of a sudden they have to slow up because there is a car driving 30 miles an hour. Now, again, they get impatient because I need to get to where I need to get to. So they're upset and they're trying to tailgate. And then we get the call going, there's a vehicle that's road rage on me because they're not going fast enough for me. So that's the frustrating part that I know our officers are also seeing, going, hey, come slow down. So,
understood. Okay, Brian, throw your 2 cents in here. Here we go.
When I was looking at the speed data, Chief and I, we did review it. I mean, a speed problem, I would say, yeah, we do have some people that are speeding, but when you're talking 85th percentile, which is generally what you look at, I'm not gonna say that there aren't people speeding, but the data actually looks good. You know, you look at the average speed and stuff like that, you're 31, 32 in a 30 mile an hour. That, I mean, by the book, you know, that's pretty good. I mean, when you're seeing 36, 37, you start having problems. Is there things that we could do in that area? Yeah, I mean, you could put any sort of like choke points and stuff like that to give people the feeling that, you know, the road is actually narrower, which makes people uncomfortable, so they do slow down. You know, ultimately, there's a multiple different things that the Institute of Traffic Engineer has out there. They have a list of about a dozen items. One of the things in there is a roundabout. When it comes to actually slowing traffic down, a traffic signal itself won't slow traffic down. Sometimes you actually do see a peak after that because people are trying to make up for lost time.
Gotcha.
Because they've stopped and now they want to make up for that time that's been lost. You run into the same thing with the stop sign. That even though, you know, you may seem as though as, yep, vehicles are slowing down, but once they try to get back up to speed, the road's wide and it's smooth. People want to move through there because they're comfortable. And what you have to do is you essentially have to make that road so it's uncomfortable. You know, other municipality I worked in, they put speed tables. Do I think they're great? Not really. They're challenging for plowing.
Yeah.
They're hard on vehicles. For those people with low hanging vehicles, Corvettes, stuff like that, you got to slow down a little bit, because otherwise you're going to tear off your front valance. So if not, you know, you have the car parts that lay on the sides of the road next to them because someone that's got an exhaust system that's hanging a little low gets tore off. So there are things that you can do, you know, to try to make the road get that narrower feeling, which then does slow people down. Of course, it all does come with costs. There are some things that we could do temporary. Now is really not the time as we go into winter, but you know, you could just put traffic drums out there and make the lane so you don't have those 12-foot lanes. You push people down into a 10 or 11-foot lane, they're going to feel awkward when they're coming, when you have a car oncoming at you that close. You can fit, but it just gives you that feeling of tightness. You can have bump outs at some of the intersections, another thing that's a little bit challenging, but you know, say Santa Barbara or Shady where we have our rapid flashing beacons, you put bump outs in those areas to allow the pedestrians to get out a little bit further. It also narrows up the road, but you also have to make sure that the plow drivers are well aware that they're there, because otherwise when they come through at their wing, it's not a pretty situation. So things that can be done, it just depends on what level of effort we want to go if we truly deem that this is one of our priorities and a problem. So
How was this data gathered?
it's through their speed board, so they set up, you know, a dynamic message.
The big visible one.
Yes.
That people slow down the minute they see it.
They generally don't, so you can actually run them in stealth mode.
Yeah, so that was going to be my question. Do we still have the small pole-mounted one?
We do, yeah.
Can we put that up in stealth mode and never turn it on and just see what people do? And get some real, actual data on it? Because, I mean, every time I see one of these, I know I slow down.
Some people slow down, some people speed up, depends on who you are.
Exactly. I would like, if we could do that, that'd be fantastic. I would like to see some real numbers in stealth where nobody knows it's there. Because it's excessive. Like, these numbers, that's not what's going on right now.
Yeah, that's something that we can work with our public safety department. I know they have the ability to make the changes in it to see.
Perfect.
Whether or not it just reads black or you get some actual numbers.
Yep. No, I just wanted to stay black and just record the data.
Brian and I have a history of working in another community together, and just like every community, especially in the state of Wisconsin at least, every community is facing these same challenges about speed, and whether it's reality or perception, it doesn't matter, right? The fact is people are concerned about the speed of motorists. And so one of the things we did there, and certainly if that's something that's a priority, we could look to budget additional solar-powered, portable-mounted speed messaging boards that could be moved throughout the community based on complaints that are received. And so then you can kind of target specific streets, neighborhoods, and what Brian and I had done in our prior community is we had these, and we would install them in stealth mode for 2 weeks. Collect data, turn them on for 2 weeks, collect data, turn them off again for 2 weeks and collect data, and then present to the board or whomever the information, and you do see a relatively passive approach of vehicles in the fact that the board is there. If it's not on, they ignore it. If it's on, you'll see a slight reduction in speed. It's usually, I think it was like 1 to 2 miles per hour. We saw in the 85th percentile. And then you turn it off again and they instantly go back to the speed in which they were comfortable in operating. So it's just kind of helpful to understand, I think, from an engineering standpoint, what the behaviors are based on the aspects of the road. And having those, and you can move them around, they're portable, they're easy to move. They're a few $1,000s, don't get me wrong, there's some expense to them, but they are a tool that we can collect traffic counts, we can collect traffic speeds, we have data then. The only thing that we found interesting is we would install them, and through social media, we would advertise that the village is doing some proactive approaches towards traffic and speed monitoring, and we've installed these signs. And because they weren't visibly turned on, residents thought, well, here's the town not knowing what they're doing, and they installed a broken sign. What a bunch of fools. All the while, for 2 weeks, we were collecting data secretly on their travel speed. And then it would work for 2 weeks, and they're like, oh, they must have fixed the sign. Look at them, they finally listened to us. And we, knowing in 2 weeks we were gonna turn it off again, and oh, look at the town, they couldn't even buy a sign that worked. It worked for 2 weeks and now it's already failed.
Yeah.
So, doing that, we're obviously gonna have that feedback from our residents that we don't know what we're doing, but in fact, what we're doing is very strategic.
I think the thing we have to remember, and Tom kind of hit it on the head, is this is not going to be taken care of by enforcement alone. We can't have someone off there 24/7. We don't have enough officers, and it won't work. So the other E's that will help make this a safe environment is engineering, which is huge, and then education, and then of course enforcement. And Brian mentioned a whole bunch of things we could do engineering-wise on that road. That road is very wide. There is no reason to go slow on that road. You got a straight shot, there's nothing really on the side that's gonna slow you down. And if we can do things like Brian said, like bump outs, we already have two RFBs on that road. Let's put a median in where those two RFBs are so that people walking have a safe spot in the middle. Then they go over, it narrows the road. Let's look at alternate side parking. It narrows the road. Maybe we look at bike lanes on there. It narrows the road. All of that will reduce the speed on the road because there's friction there, because the people aren't as comfortable and they'll slow down. A really good example of this, if you are familiar with Libel Street in Alloway, they just redid that Libel Street from basically the border of Green Bay down to, I think, just where 172 goes across. And it was similar to Cormier, identical. Big, wide road, lots of people driving on it really fast. They changed that road up. The speed on that has dropped. Talked to some of the board members there, talked to their planner there, and it has made a huge difference in that community and in that area, because just by making it look narrow, as Brian already mentioned, it slows vehicles down. So let's look at some of that stuff for Cormier and say, and some of it isn't a real high price, it's paint maybe that we do. And Brian had mentioned before with Main Avenue, being east-west connection from basically Packerland to the river. Cormier's another one, Packerland all the way out. Let's make it so people can use it by foot, by bike, by car, and let's slow those darn cars down there, and we can do it. It can be done. It's done in a lot of different places. We can do it.
The only thing we're missing with Cormier is Shady West. We do not have any sidewalk.
I know, but we could work on that too.
Yep.
And I like the sidewalk I like the sidewalk you just put in on north, that little piece.
Yep. Thanks.
And that's gonna keep going west, isn't it? I'm teasing.
That's for a board decision.
I know it is. But yeah, there's ways to do this, and enforcement alone will never do it. It can't do it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. 10F, consider, discuss, act on changes to the regular village board meeting schedule for December 2025 and regular meeting starting times identified under Chapter 2, Section 46 of the Ashwaubenon Municipal Code. Joel, I had brought this to Joel because it was mentioned to me about, was from several people about changing the board meeting. So I'll let you take it from
Earlier
here.
or later, Mary?
I'm sorry, what?
Earlier or later?
Earlier, I mean, we had suggestions of 8 in the morning. And,
So there's two things. So one, under statutory law and our village code, we've established what our regular meeting schedule is. And if there are alterations to that meeting schedule, then the board has to bring those forward for consideration. So traditionally, what we've done for certain circumstances, whether it be, we rarely for village board, and this is for village board only, not committees or commissions. They're not bound by that same code requirement. But for village board only, we occasionally have situations where a holiday or a near holiday falls on a Tuesday that the board would regularly meet. In that case, we have in December, our board meeting is scheduled right now for December 23rd. So is that something, traditionally the board has moved or advanced that meeting up a week to the prior Tuesday. So if that's the case, the board would need to take action on approving the moving of the regular meeting for December 2025 from 12/23 to 12/16. And while we're at it, if, as Mary had requested, if there's a request to change the regular meeting time in the code, meaning start time of all meetings, you can do that. It would just require an ordinance amendment. But before we even draft that, we thought, well, we have this item on the agenda. We'll bring it up for conversation. And if it's something that the board would like to entertain, we would draft the ordinance to do so. That's it.
okay.
You're saying you said all meetings for change of time, or just this one particular which we've done in the past?
No, my understanding is we need to move the meeting date for December. So that's
16th.
one item, so you would take action on that.
Right.
And then if the board desires to change the meeting time for all future regular meetings, not necessarily day or dates, but start time, we could certainly entertain that, but that would require an ordinance to be presented at a future meeting.
So the 16th normally has park board and finance personnel, so would those be canceled and just do village board that night or adjusted in some manner?
Yeah, it's either gonna be canceled or those two committees or boards would get moved to a different either an appropriate time or a different date.
Well, let's take care of that one first. I'll make the motion that we move December's village board meeting to December the 16th.
Second.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move the December village board meeting to December 16th, 2025. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carried. That one's done. Okay, the next item.
What was the proposed new start time, I guess?
Kind of up in the air. I had suggestions of 8 o'clock. I had suggestions of 3 o'clock. There were suggestions of
You
4
know,
o'clock, 5 o'clock.
As much as I would like to have it be earlier, I do like the idea that it allows the public to be here at 6 o'clock at night.
I agree. I mean,
I feel the same way. We've had some discussions here that really got involved with citizens. To run it at 3, most of the board meetings that have a lot of input are gray heads anyway, and they have the time, but we still have a lot of residents that want to be here involved in that. So I don't know if.
Yeah,
If
I
I
feel
had
like
a
it should stay.
suggestion, maybe start the meeting at 5, but still that hurts the people that work from 8 to 5.
Yeah, I would
So
say.
I don't have a,
I would say 5:30 would be the earliest that.
maybe the bump of a 5:30, because we did go from, what was it, 6:30 to 6?
6:30.
Already?
We've gone.
It was 7, Mary?
Was
All
7,
right.
yeah.
You know, 5:30 I would entertain, but
Yeah.
that would be the best. To run it in the afternoon,
No.
we need public input.
I wouldn't mind 5:30. and see what happens if we get pushback on it. I don't think we would, but I wouldn't mind seeing 5:30. Me personally, every month, wait until 6 o'clock. I got a lot of time between when I'm getting home from whatever I'm doing and then heading out to the meeting. I think a lot of people are the same. That's just my thought.
Let me ask Aaron this question. Aaron, since a lot of the people that come before us has to do with the planning area and what the developments and that's going on, do you see any issue with us moving the time earlier?
Most of the people that attend the public hearings are typically the development team themselves.
Yep.
So really no issue from them since they're at work either during the day or, whenever they need to be here. In terms of public hearings, except for a few rare ones that generate a lot of interest, most of the times, if I get comment at all, it'll be via email or a phone call, or else they also attending online is a convenient option for a lot of folks who just can't or don't want to make the night meeting.
Okay. Yeah. I'd say we can go at 5:30, and then let's try 5:30.
I would make a motion to go for 5:30 and see how we work with it. Doesn't hurt, doesn't cut down cocktail time too much.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move the village board meeting time from 6 o'clock to 5:30. Any other discussion?
When would we start is the other discussion. Do we want to start that?
Could just fill in the blank on the 16th.
So we have to create an ordinance ultimately. As part of that ordinance, you could create an effective date. So if
Perfect.
that effective date is January 1, starting in the calendar year 2026.
That would probably make the
You could do
most
that
sense.
as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Number 11, agenda items for next meeting. If you have anything, give us a call. Number 12, we're going to convene into closed session. During the meeting, the village board of the Village of Ashwaubenon may convene into closed session pursuant to A and B on your agenda. I need a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go in closed session?
Second.
Motion and a second. Voice vote, please.
President Kardowski,
Yes.
Trustee Paul,
Yes.
Trustee Atkinson,
Yes.
Trustee Service,
Yes.
Trustee Krieger,
Yes.
Trustee Flukie,
Yes.
and Trustee Zerbal will not be able to attend.